In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, how to implement a content security policy.
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I'm your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we'll be exploring how to implement a content security policy. With me to do that is Jason Gillam, CIO of Secure Ideas, an application security expert with over 25 years of experience across system architecture, penetration testing, and secure development practice. Jason is also an OWASP project lead for Samurai WTF, where he champions practical hands-on security education. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EAS. Feedback for the show, timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. You can rate the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you're on YouTube listening to this, hit the like button. ShowMeCon dates. This is a ShowMeCon sponsored episode. ShowMeCon is June 6th through the 10th. So the conference itself is 9 and 10. And the training is 6th through the 8th. There's a variety of training. There's 3-day training, including forensics, intrusion detection, mastering InfoSec, and then hands-on hacking. And then there's a 1-day API pen testing and web app pen testing course. You can get $50 off either a ticket or training by using ExploreSec as the promo code. So this was one that I thought I had done stuff on CSP before. It's something when I was doing application security stuff that I really thought added a lot of value to a website, and worked with developers. It's really cool stuff, but I realized I hadn't really done a podcast on that, so it was great to see Jason was doing one at ShowMeCon, and that just lined up. So we had a really great conversation about some of just a little bit of everything about like the content security policy itself, and then some of the pitfalls and like how to actually get started. So this was again just really good. So yeah. We'll go ahead and get into it. I started by asking Jason if he's ever been to ShowMeCon.
I've never been to ShowMeCon. No, it's been on my wish list for years, and I just never made it for one reason or another. And the irony of that is I'm actually friends with Dave Chronister, so like mostly through Kevin, but I've been with Secure Ideas now for 13 years, so you'd think at some point I probably would have made it down there, but I never did.
Yeah. Well, he did shut it down for 4 years, so that there's definitely that right there as well.
And last year I had a conflict. Last year I think I was traveling in Europe at the time. Can't remember if it was Europe or Newfoundland, because I made both of those trips last year in the spring. So,
That's quite a bit of a conflict. Is I'm going to be in Europe. Sorry, man. And he had it a weird time last year. Like everyone was giving him crap too, because he had it Mother's Day weekend, and I was like, dude, like I gotta have my wife drop me off at the airport on Mother's Day to fly out to ShowMeCon. So yeah, but he got a lot, not just from me, but from everybody. So now it's in the proper spot. It's in early June, which is I think a great time because I bring my kids out there, and we enjoy it. They get to enjoy the casino and stuff, but.
Evan was saying you've been covering ShowMeCon for a while. How long have you been doing this?
Let's see, what was it? 2016. So I did I did 2016 to 2018. 2019, I had a conflict. I had a family trip that had been planned for 5 years to go out to Yellowstone. So I was like, dude, I can't make it. He wanted me to come out, but I couldn't make it. I told him that year. And unfortunately, that was also the year right before the pandemic and everything shut down. Because I was excited to get back to it in 2020, and then everything just kind of went upside down in the world. Yeah. So I've been there. I've been speaking. Now that he's brought it back, I am more involved, but like doing like podcasts like this, trying to help him promote the conference and get people out there, and then talk to people like you about some of the stuff that you're talking about at the conference to get people excited. And it fits my format, because I have a very generalist podcast where it covers a bit of everything. And I'm actually, when I saw your talk with on content security policy, I was quite excited because I ran Well, I built an application security program at a healthcare company back in 2016.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the first things because I remember I read Troy Hunt a lot.
Yeah.
I don't as much now, but he used to be my go-to for like AppSec stuff. And he talked about I don't know if you ever saw the post about the Harlem Shake where you can make content, it's like a content security policy check where you could see if they have it in place that it allows loading of third-party objects. So it essentially made like icons and other stuff like you could do it on the FBI website, make it shake, and then it played music. And then like you'd go to a place like Twitter, and Twitter had their content security policy in place. And so it wouldn't actually let you load anything. And it wasn't like an actual vulnerability because you're doing it local to your machine just in the console, but it kind of showed that how content security could block like JavaScript and other stuff from being loaded on the web page. So
I'm going to make a note of that because I need to look that up.
You do, yes. Yeah, look it up. I've used it at demos for developers, and they just absolutely love it. It's like making a lot of websites have gotten a lot stronger about it, but I think still FBI.gov still allows like the Harlem Shake to occur. But I think last I did it, and you could probably fix some of it, but it's like where it was loading the audio from. It still shook the icons, but where it was loading the audio from, I think someone had to take down the audio. So it wasn't loading the audio anymore. But he has videos and other stuff that demonstrate it. And that's a really cool, like I thought a very cool way of, and it's not even his, it was somebody else that he saw, but that's where I saw it.
Yeah, and promoting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I took it internal and started having our developers put it in place as another layer of protection. So
yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. My background, I came from software development. So I graduated in 97 from college. And I went into software development, and I had been doing that even before then, actually. So, the little tidbit of Jason trivia that I usually put in my bio or when I'm talking about myself at the beginning of a class is the fact that my first computer was a Commodore VIC-20.
Okay.
So it was way back.
I was going to say, that's going way back there.
I had bought that after, like, I saved up my own money for it from mowing lawns because my parents, they didn't even really understand computers at all, where they were going at it. So yeah, that was how long ago I've been doing this. I've been a nerd my entire life. And
then I'm assuming you went to the development space and then you got in IT security. Like, how long were you a developer and then made the jump?
Yeah. So it was about 15 or 16 years ago, somewhere in that time range. I was working at Bank of America. So here, I was living here, working at Bank of America, and I took a class. I was at that time I was with the enterprise architecture team, and I took a class on application security, and was one of those. Like how to hack into applications type of, like, it was geared towards developers, but it's really a pen testing class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that at that point I was hooked. So sort of went into a little bit of a deep dive on that. Got recruited by the consumer banking security by design team. So I actually wasn't part of the global InfoSec team. It was this separate team that the consumer banking line of business had stood up, and we just started doing pen testing across all their apps, especially a lot of the internal ones that weren't getting covered by GIS because they just didn't have the capacity. And that's how I met Kevin, because we're like, hey, let's do SANS training, and so Kevin he taught one of the classes, and then he and I hit it off, and that was that. I ended up getting I sent him my resume one day. I said, "Hey, look, I'm looking for a job." And he had mentioned previously, "I can help you get into the industry," is what he said.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that meant he was going to hire me, but
well, he knows a lot of, he knows a lot of people. I'm assuming
exactly. I thought he was just going to use his connections and say, "Yeah, I know so and so's hired."
Yeah. Hey, I have this company, and that's what I've talked to other developers. I did a lot more AppSec talks and other stuff, but I would talk to developers about the fact of, they were like, hey, and they were at a security conference. They go, hey, how do I get into security? I was like, you're a unicorn, because it is so hard to find a AppSec person with development background and really a developer that wants to go, because a lot of the developers that I've met have more of that builder mindset, right? So when I come in and I'm telling them how I can kick over their sandcastle, that one, they don't like that, but two, it's just a different mindset. They just don't think that way. And so people that want to get into the space, I told you, you have the understanding of it. Because I even got into AppSec. I don't have a developer background, but I was able to get in and understand, like I could talk code and other stuff. And showed them how to like remediate. Like I said, I figured out content security policy and how to put it in place. But I've always told the developers, like, just switching over to AppSec. It's a. I feel like it's an easier transition for someone like you that's done it on the other side and then able to,
I think so.
Yeah. Like break it down. Like you're able to break it, but then you're going, okay, this is how you specifically how to fix this, right? How to do this better. And that's what I tell people is like a lot of development is just it's already in the documentation and the frameworks. You just have to not turn security off at this point.
Don't turn off. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It's served me pretty well because even in my earlier days with Secure Ideas, that's when I was actually doing a whole bunch of Burp plugin development at that time, right? So CO2 and Parameter. I spun those up, and I did a bunch of other ones too that I never put in the store because it was just sort of one-offs that I needed for a couple of tests or something. But yeah, like just being able to have that developer background really helped. So
yeah, no, for sure. Kevin's a great guy. I really like. He's one. I laugh so hard when I have him, and I don't know if he told you, but I had him on the podcast earlier this year, and every year's I just start laughing so hard. And I get like a nice little ab workout during it. Not expecting you to do the same thing because Kevin's Kevin, right? He's his own person.
No.
And I have no idea when he comes on the podcast, I have no idea what he's going to talk about. It's just like, all right, we're just going for a ride at this point. Just embrace the chaos, and we are going.
Yeah. So he and I are it's this weird sort of partnership that we have as business partners because like we're like a yin and yang. Like we are very different, but still we connect in the right places. And so it's rare for us to actually have disagreements on things, even though we express our points of view in completely different ways. I'm very much analytical, spreadsheets. I like my coding, all this kind of stuff. I love playing with AI. That's been a lot of fun lately. And Kevin, on the other hand, he's a storyteller. He's amazing at that sort of thing, right? So he gets up on stage and he's able to actually influence people just by, telling a story of things. And he's also incredibly smart. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you've spoken quite a bit, haven't you?
I have. I did a lot more speaking earlier. Yeah, I think I kind of fell into that same crowd. I think a lot of people ran into this where once COVID came around, we basically just kind of backed off from it because virtual events just aren't the same. And it's taken me a while to kind of get my feet back under me and go, yeah, I need to get out there and do some more speaking. So I've done a little bit over the last few years, but it's really only been, small number of events, a handful of events each year. But I'm trying to get out and do more now. So,
yeah, definitely. Even the conference scene, I think, has just slowly started ramping back up. Like some people came back pretty quickly, but then like ShowMeCon, they just started last year, which is 4 years after they had shut down. So, yeah.
It's hard to get those numbers back up sometimes.
Everywhere. So we had I had a local user group that I help run in Columbia, South Carolina. We had 25 people regularly at meetups prior to the pandemic. And within the last, it's just been a struggle to get people to come back out. I don't like, and I feel like a lot more companies are having people come back into the office. So I don't know if people just forgot about us or remote or moved out of town or what, but we never got anywhere near. We maybe max out like 5 people in person, even several years after. So now funny enough, we've actually just gone straight virtual because we still want to have something, but it's just easier for people to be in the house and do. And like you, like I got kind of burnt out on the virtual stuff. It seemed like virtual everything at some point that it's just like it. And I don't know for you, but for me as a speaker, I want to see some of the interaction. I want to try to read the room a little bit, see if things are hitting. You always look for that person that's nodding their head or taking notes, or but then you have to avoid the people like sleeping in the front row because they were out too late last night, but they're obligated to come to talks and stuff.
Keep you awake.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that interaction a lot more. So
yeah. Actually, the sleeping in the front, that reminds me of the last place I went to do a talk. Last month I did a B-side Charlotte, and they did it in Discovery Place in Charlotte. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's one of those like science museum sort of hands-on type
Okay.
for kids, and they had event space in there. But the fun thing was I actually got to be quote unquote on stage in an IMAX theater, which was kind of
That's awesome. Yeah.
So it was a double-edged sword. One, it was really awesome. It was like, this is great. The bad thing was like I was at the bottom. So it was like, looking up at the audience entirely. Like, so I was at the very bottom of the room. And that's why I say quote unquote up on stage, because there was no up, it was down on stage. It was at the very, very bottom. So it was kind of awkward. It also didn't help that I had my, the screen that they had showing my slides was just a laptop that was really far away from me. There was no podium or anything nearby. So I had to actually turn around to be able to see what slide I was on to try to, remind myself of, what I have next. Cause I don't memorize my talks, but, so that was fun.
Yeah. I'm the same. I have to have my speaker notes. Like I really want to have my speaker notes, but I've been to a couple places where it's like, well, I guess I'm winging this. I think I have everything, but there's little points and other stuff that, and everyone's a little bit different just because of the flow of things. And I don't like to lock it down, and I do practice it and other stuff, but then, that allows me to freestyle a little bit at certain points. If I have a thought in my head pop up during my presentation that might contribute to the presentation, I like to do that. But yeah, when you're trying to just remember your slides, that's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Well, which slide's next? I can't remember. Did I put that on a slide?
Yeah, I have the ones where I like to have a flow where it's like, and then while I'm talking, I go to the next slide, right? And sometimes I go to and it's like, oh well, I just blew my point at the previous before that. So this is what it speaker problems, I guess.
Yeah. All right.
So with the why the content security policy talk?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because this is an old topic, right? Like you mentioned this before. This has been around for a while. And what we found both in our pen test and then also just kind of looking at CSPs out there and helping people build them, what we found is that there's it's almost a useless finding to put on a pen test report. Because it's the way that it's treated as like a checkbox thing. And that this is what my theory was, right? So I'm like, okay, it just seems like most of the CSPs that I look at, it just seems like they're really not that good. They're basically, they're just there to check a box, and there's not a whole lot of capabilities built into that CSP. Like the directives are very open and not really stopping much. And you don't necessarily need a content security policy, but it is a valid, very useful tool that's there. And so I started thinking, okay, well, maybe part of the problem is people just don't really know how to implement them. And we actually ran into this ourselves. We had a CSP missing on a website that we run, and we're like, it's sort of that we should probably do what we're telling everybody else they need to do, right? So let's put a CSP on here, even though I'm pretty sure there are no other vulnerabilities on there because but let's go ahead and put a CSP on. And so I kind of walked through, okay, how do you actually do this? And that is kind of where the thought came from. It's like, I don't think there are that many like red team people or red team or let's say offensive security people who actually go through the steps of implementing the security control. And so they're putting this advice on a page, things like, hey, don't use unsafe inline in your content security policy, but they don't really know exactly how it works or what it means, or like, how do you actually set this up so that it works the way that you want it to, right? And that's kind of where the idea took root. And then I'm like, okay, well, next thing I need to do is see if I can get some actual data behind whether it's worth building this out. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to grab CSPs from a whole bunch of websites. So I found one of those like top list websites and grabbed 1 million domains and wrote a Python script. This is where AI comes in. It's very helpful for writing little scripts like this. Mm-hmm. Grab all the content security policies and shove them all into a database, and then I can pull some analytics out of it. Like, this is great. So this is what I've done just in the past couple of weeks. This is pretty recent. And I I pulled up what I discovered of those sites. Around 3/4 of them, I actually was able to get some sort of web content back. The other ones, I don't know. I didn't investigate why, but I didn't get valid responses from them. So I don't know if maybe they didn't have a website at the main location, or I don't know. But that doesn't really matter. I still had, around 750,000 domains worth of data, right? And so I pull this back and I'm looking at it, and it's like, okay, so around 82% of them didn't have any CSP at all. Like, okay, so there's that problem.
Yep.
But then what I wanted to do is dig into, okay, well, the ones who are doing it, are they even doing it right? And what I found is I'm bringing up my data here, so I'm actually getting the right numbers. Of the ones I brought up, I came up with a classification system for these to say, okay, let's call this set of directives as pretty much ineffective, because it's there, it exists, but it's basically allowing everything. And then I have like a minimal one, and then I went into more and more effective. So just kind of come up with this effective rate in this. But it didn't really matter, because around 30% of them are ineffective, like completely ineffective. The CSP is there, but it's not doing anything. And then
they have the asterisk that just allows everything.
It basically allows everything. Yeah. So I'm like, that's checkbox right there.
Yeah,
so,
that's checkbox. Yep.
Absolutely just a checkbox. Our security team said we had to have one, so we made one. It won't break anything. It just works for the checkbox anyway. It doesn't actually prevent anything either. And then over half of them were basically fell into that minimal bucket of, not really. They're like, they have some controls, some directives in place, but it's not really full coverage at all, and still allowing unsafe inline and things like that. And then I had, when I broke it down, like if you look at like the top tier, who's doing the best, like it's like 0.6%. It's like this tiny sliver.
Wow.
And that's 0.6% of the 20% who actually have them. So if you were looking at the data I pulled on the internet, that's, I don't know, what does that end up being? Less than 0.1% actually have like fully implemented using either nonces or hashes types of CSPs in place. Like it's a tiny, tiny sliver that actually do. Now, granted, all these are all websites that are like the most common websites. So a lot of these might not really need a CSP, like it'd be Google, for example. I can't remember if they were one of the ones that have one or not, but no, it's not like they're all e-commerce websites. Well, that's kind of what led me down that path of going next to, okay, so this actually is a problem. So we have content security policies. We're telling people they need to do them on their pen tests. Sometimes they do. And a lot of the time when they do, it's not very useful anyway. So how do we fix that?
Well, yeah. And yeah, no, I think it's good, because I haven't seen a CSP talk in a while. Like I said, I dug into it a lot. I am surprised at how many people don't know about it, but it's like you said, it's more of like an extra layer, right? It's if you've built your website to avoid cross-site scripting, SQL injection, things like that, it just adds another layer, and in the event something gets added, right? But that's also too, it's tough to put one in place, right? Mm-hmm. As far as you have to account for every single domain you're loading on your website, or you're going to break your website at the end of the day.
Yeah. You have to come up with some sort of strategy or template or something to do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it takes some testing, and I wouldn't solely put this on the developers, right? It takes a security person to sit down with the developers to go through on like a development, domain or something, a dev environment, to like try to build that out. And then what happens in dev, it's going to be very different in the next levels, right? So you're kind of like building that up.
Yeah, and even then, you do have the report option on there, so you probably want to do significant testing with that on there too before you actually flip the switch. Mm-hmm. So, there's the mechanisms are in place to make it happen, but for some reason, content security policies, because I think it's one of the better controls that are in place, because you can actually definitively say, browser, don't do these things, and that's just so much better than saying, hey, developer, make sure you sanitize all the inputs, because that works until it doesn't. Like there'll be the one that they miss or something like that. Whereas the content security policy, there isn't a missed one. It's going to do it for every single one of them. And so it's just as, another layer similar to a WAF in that sense.
I was just thinking, I was going to ask you if you feel like you could, instead, in place of a WAF, if you feel like you would feel comfortable with the CSP, or if a WAF, you'd still want a WAF.
Yeah. No, I would do either or. I think the best option is to use both, but
yeah,
it's like you said before, these are layers, right? So if you have good coding hygiene on the security side, listen, from the AppSec side, you're actually doing all of your input validation, your output encoding. And like, so overall, that's good. Maybe you have a SaaS solution in place as well. So you're doing your static analysis. Then, you have enough of those other controls in place. I don't think a WAF is necessarily necessary. That's a fun way to say it. But it helps. I mean, it's another layer, right? So.
Well, like you said, it allows for the fact that if another developer comes in, we know the life cycle of developer at a company is 2 to 3 years, right? So you're going to have people coming in, don't understand the code, put something, in place, or you're going to have someone newer, in the development field come in and not know what they're doing. They're just Googling their answers or using AI. And we know AI can be good for development, but also can be bad for development. A lot like Stack Overflow. It's like, no, don't use the first response. You want to dig in a little bit.
Make sure you understand what it's saying.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I could see totally where, and like you said, it's just, it takes a little bit of effort, and to me, it's self-contained. That's, like you said, the website telling or the application telling the browser, don't do these things for me. And then security's not coming in bolting on extra stuff. That's also why it's like the WAF can add another thing where I've seen that conversation around slamming a WAF in place and it takes down the website. And it's like, well, now you've just created another set of problems. So, I like building as much, I guess. That's why I like strong code or quality code, because I think you have quality code, you're going to avoid a lot of vulnerabilities just right off the bat. And CSP kind of is the same thing. It's something available to developers that they put in place. It keeps the security out of your hair, right?
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, it's the way I look at it is you have the browsers are really powerful. They can do all kinds of things, and by default, all those things are turned on. And if you're not making use of all of those things, then start turning some of them off. And a content security policy is, I don't want to say it's the only one, but I think it's the main mechanism that exists to turn those off across all browsers. It's not up to the user to go in and turn them off. It's actually the website itself is saying, hey, don't use this feature, or don't load content from here. That only load it from this set of locations that I've allowed. So it's really good that way.
What's been your most memorable CSP story you've encountered?
The most memorable, the most memorable story I have is on a pen test. And what I was doing a penetration test of a website. And the login screen on that website had, for some reason, and I don't remember what the reason was. This was a few years ago, but for some reason there was an extra field on the login form that happened at the top of the form. It was a hidden field. So you have username, password, and then right above that was some other field, and that field was controlled by input on the in the URL. So it was a URL parameter would actually be placed inside of there.
Those are always fun.
I'm like, great, I got cross-site scripting, and I go to do it. It's like, no, I don't have cross-site scripting because there's a CSP in place.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, yes, they did it right. And then I started staring at it. I was like, yeah, but they're not stopping me from submitting the form somewhere else. So I did inject cross-site scripting payload in there, but I did inject HTML. And what I was able to do is close off that form because all it had in it was a hidden form field and nothing else, right? So it didn't actually use any space on the page. And then I opened a new form that was going to be submitted to the location of my choice. And then I just let the rest continue on for the rest of the page. And so basically I was able to put a payload in there that was not a cross-site scripting payload, but still absolutely capable of capturing usernames and passwords. And it worked. Now, if they had the right directive in there, there is a directive in CSP for controlling the location of like where you can submit forms. But that wasn't part of their content security policy. They had done the cross-site scripting. They'd prevented inline scripts, but not changes that were just pure HTML because of the form. So.
Yeah, that sounds like they put in that sounds like they had a previous pen test that they have solved for that with CSP, so they don't have to rewrite everything, and then you just found the other way around.
I just found another way around it, yeah.
Which is great.
But it is a lesson learned. I mean, you do have to look at all of the different possible directives inside of the CSP, because although a lot of people focus on the cross-site scripting one, actually when I looked through my data, the directive that's actually more common is the form submission one. So there are a lot of people use CSP just to do the form control where forms can be submitted, which is interesting.
Yeah,
like that they actually do that. But yeah, it's worth looking through everything on there and turning stuff off that you don't need. So
yep. How are you seeing AI used to like help build a CSP policy, if at all?
I think it could be really good, because there is a lot of knowledge around content security policies that we write about it a lot, and it's very well defined. Like Mozilla has a very good, like very well detailed defined guide on it. So there's enough of the sort of input material, I guess, that AI needs to be able to understand. Okay, this is what a good security policy should look like. I don't know whether we'll reach a point where AI just basically builds one on the fly while it's rendering a website or anything like that. I don't know if we need to get there, but I do think that it could like look at a code base and help write a better one, maybe during build time or something like that, or when you're doing a deployment. It could write one there where it just basically figures out, okay, what are all the scripts that are going to show up on the various different pages on your website? Here's a set of hashes for those, and basically do build the hash-based directives in there so that other things just wouldn't work. So I could see it maybe doing some of that. I mean, you could do a lot of that programmatically as well, but
yeah, and a lot of that is trying to understand if there's a way to, I guess, make it easier to put CSP in place, especially, I feel like you mentioned AI earlier. I feel like every podcast interview I do is like, how is AI impacting this? So I want to ask a little bit different, but, CSP, like, as far as like automation, right. And keeping it up to date, like how difficult is it to keep up to date, or do you really need to?
I think it depends on how you've implemented it. And maybe the type of asset that you're trying to protect, because there's two main more advanced ways of protecting it. And I'm going to focus mostly on the scripts, the JavaScript side of things, and protecting against attacks there, because that's one of the main focus areas. If someone's able to inject scripts on your site, then that's one of the worst possible problems you can have.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's something where everything's pretty static during the website generation phase, so as you're like, so if you think like there's a lot of tools out there, they basically build a static website, right? So there's not a whole lot of dynamic stuff happening in there, but it could still have scripts to support it, move things around, animations, that sort of thing. So in those cases, the strongest approach is to use the hashes in the directives, right? And because you should be able to do that at that time where you're generating the site, and then it's just done, and you don't have to worry about it. So as long as you're going, like with today's types of websites, it really shouldn't be that big a deal, because we tend to build everything using a CI/CD type of pipeline anyway. So this is just another step in there. So set it up, let it go. And even if you have a more dynamic site, you can still do that. Although in that case, you might want to leverage nonces more than hashes. Just because with a nonce, The nonce approach, I don't know. There's not really that much of a difference in like which one's more secure than the other, from what I can see. But nonces are a little bit easier to manage because they change on the fly. So you basically all you need to do is, and this is part of what I will demonstrate a way to do this actually in my talk is you can put placeholders throughout the website itself, like everywhere where you plan on having a script run, and then you have you basically swap in a nonce for those placeholders as it gets rendered. So it changes on every request, and then you can just kind of go from there. So
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. I hadn't heard of that, but that makes sense, especially if you can, like you were saying. I would push back a little bit that as I love CI/CD, but I don't think everybody's doing it. There's too many environments where it's just like, oh, you need to put some sort of pipeline in place. This is going to make your life but it takes a lot of work again to build that out.
Well, and one of the big challenges that I think we're both kind of dancing around here is the fact that, yeah, I said with a lot of modernly developed apps.
No, okay, fair enough.
You tend to go down that path, but there's a whole pile of legacy apps out there.
Yep. And they're going to be around for a long time. I mean, you worked in the banking space. You've probably seen it. I worked in the healthcare space. I've seen it.
I'm sure there's still apps that are backed by a mainframe somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Well, it's almost unhackable because I can guarantee you a lot of people don't know how to hack that mainframe at this point. So, what's one actionable tip you would give for someone looking to start implementing CSP?
That's a great question. Where do you start? I think one of the first things you should do is, I guess part of the question is, are we saying somebody who doesn't have one at all, or they have one, but they just don't really understand how it works?
I think it could be the same question, but I would say they don't have anything. They don't have any CSP. They go check. They're going to go check their website. Actually, what's your check for checking to see if the CSP policy is in place? Let's start there. That's probably the starting point, honestly. Do you have something in place?
That's a really good point. Yeah. First, just look if you have one, right?
Yeah.
If you do, I don't know. I can read through one and kind of see what it's doing, what it's not doing, but there are several CSP checkers online that are all pretty good. And they will. The only problem is that they're going to give you like a set of findings or vulnerabilities in your CSP and say these are the things you need to fix. And I understand that approach. It doesn't seem to be working. Otherwise, I wouldn't have all the data that I have on how many bad CSPs are out there. So I think that that is still a good place to start if you're just trying to understand, okay, well, what can I do to protect this? But then hopefully, and this is the kind of leads into where I'm hoping to go with this in the long term, is that I'll have some sort of way to demonstrate, okay, how do you make a good CSP to begin with? Like, how do you start off with a good one? So that it's because I think with the problem that's happening in a lot of cases, people are starting off with a bad one and then trying to improve it. But you should be able to start with a good one, and then loosen things up from there. So I could look online to see if there's, CSP checker.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I like using the Harlem Shake because that usually you'll see icons start shaking right away. It's like, all right, they don't have a CSP in place. But checkers, because I thought there was someone put up, like you mentioned it earlier, as a report site. Like it shows you what domains you need or something like that.
Well, there's two aspects to this. One is, like, I just brought one up here. There's a CSP evaluator with google.com, which I've used that one before.
Okay.
And it was just the first Google search that came back. There are several out there that can work pretty well. But no, so the report feature I'm talking about is actually built into the CSP. So there's the report only header.
Okay.
And you basically have a couple of different options for that one. You can actually point your report to a particular URL, and it will push information to that as people load up the page. And the other thing is you can just have that field in there and just look in your JavaScript console inside the browser. and that will actually show you all of the things that would have failed a content security policy. But if it's set to report and you don't have the actual CSP header on there, then your page will still work even if it's failing CSP checks. You'll just get like the errors will show up inside of that console so you can see what's breaking. And so it can just be an iterative process. I think part of this is just education, right? We tell a developer or teach a developer, this is what the content security policy is going to do. This is how it's going to protect your site. And then they just, and then just kind of teach them how to iterate through, finding those errors and trying to fix, okay, well, how do we address each one of these? But going back to, like I said, the nonce approach, ideally that's what you want to do, is something like a nonce or hash approach where it's either part of the pipeline or built in as a layer at the web server, because in those cases you have a solution that just gets applied globally across the code base rather than have to fix individual issues as they pop up. So that I think is, and again, it's another education point. A lot of people look at the nonces and hashes and think, oh, it's going to be impossible for me to actually get this to work because it's legacy code or whatever. And it's like, I don't really think it's that hard. I think you just need to understand how it works. So.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's just good advice in general, is understanding how things work. And what I will say and bring back up as kind of a final point is use case, right? Because you mentioned it is not everything necessarily needs a CSP, but if you have forms, you have fields, you have places people can essentially drop, scripts or any sort of input, that's where you really want to be concerned. So even you don't have to just, because sometimes I see security people just go off and they just implement everywhere, and it's like, well, you didn't really prioritize like what's your actual ones, which ones actually need it, this one doesn't, what can you get by with, because you could implement it everywhere, but that could take a long time too to put it on absolutely everything.
The other thing I was going to say is that the CSP is all about turning things off. Remember I said that earlier too, right? So it actually falls into that same wisdom that we used on web pen tests, or on network pen tests, where we say, hey, disable unnecessary services. Like that is a thing, right? Yeah. If you don't need an SSH port or a telnet port open to the internet, then turn that off or block it or something, right? That's what this is. This does exactly that. So we can say, hey, don't load images from there, or don't allow these features to work. And yeah, we can just turn them off there.
Yeah, turning off things is good.
Turn off all the things you don't need. Yeah.
Yep. What's a favorite resource you like or you use for staying up to date with like application security?
Okay, that was that's a good question, but yeah, it kind of leads into something that I am pretty close to, which is OWASP.
Okay. So, yeah, love OWASP.
I work really close. I'm on the OWASP project committee right now, so. I inherited that role from Kevin when he stepped away from it. So, and I've been working with them for the last couple of years. So
that'll keep you busy. Like I don't think people realize like how big OWASP is. It's got everything and it continues to grow. And it's such a great resource, especially for, I've pointed developers to it for like I love the cheat sheets because it kind of breaks a lot of these. You can dive into a lot of these concepts, but then you can get cheat sheets. It's like, just go check these things, right? It kind of gets the cliff notes of some of the concepts.
Yeah, just run through this and it'll lead you down the right path. And yeah,
absolutely. Good. Cool. What would you like to plug?
Other than the talk that I'm going to do at ShowMeCon that everyone can go see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sounds like a great talk, especially if you're doing like, I love seeing ones that have like demos and other stuff. Like, here's how you actually do this. Yeah.
I don't know. I hadn't really gone into this thinking that there was anything else on my plate right now. So that is the main thing that I'm interested in right now is come see my talk at ShowMeCon and we'll talk about CSP and I'll show some demos. I found that for me, I love having live demos. It's not about, living on the edge or something. Cause I know there's a lot of people who are like, hey, I don't know. I have to, pre-record it or whatever. And it's like, no, don't do that. Just be familiar enough with it that you can fix it if it breaks. So,
which is that's always a great highlight is when it breaks and you can highlight like, here's how I'm fixing it. Cause that's what actually happens in, day-to-day work.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is my whole talk isn't all one demo anyway. So, if everything goes terribly bad and it doesn't work, then I can still talk through most of it anyway. But but yeah, come see the talk. Come to ShowMeCon. It's going to be a great conference, I'm sure. I have never been, but I've heard really great things.
We got full size candy bars if you're into that. Yeah, I would say I'll plug for you, Low Wasp. You already said it, and then Secure Ideas where you work. So,
yep.
Cool. All right, Jason. Well, thank you for joining me to discuss how to implement content security policy.
All right. Thank you.